even at the risk of my own success, my own career. I've been sent here to give y'all the truth. Jay-Z, I know you got killers. Please don't send them at my head. Just call me. Talk to me like a man.
I think within like 36 hours of him exposing Jay-Z, he's thrown in a psych ward. One of my very good friends was with one of his family members that was with him. They believed that he was drugged. I believe that he was targeted for exposing Jay-Z, and they threw him in a psych ward, and he was thrown there against his will, and that's like common knowledge. And that was their way to say, shut up. And if you don't shut up, we'll kill you. And so what was the first thing that Kanye West did when he got out of the psych ward? He went to see President Trump. He knows that President Trump is not one of them. And I believe that he went to meet with President Trump because he was scared. And he wanted to tell President Trump the truth of what happened to him and how he was targeted. And he wanted protection from the president.
This is the future. This is the way of thinking to make America great again.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. I have an absolute must-hear interview update with Liz Crokin ready for you, and I want to start with this. Let's level set, shall we? We didn't even know about Pizzagate until the Podesta emails were released on October 7th, 2016. Folks, it hasn't even been 2 years since we found out about this horror, which is known in DC as Pizzagate and globally as Pedogate. Sure, we knew about isolated cases, Jimmy Savile and, Sir Edward Heath and the Franklin cover-up, but we had no idea it was this systemic and ran this deep. As Q said, it's bigger than you can imagine. Liz Crokin, you're one of the leading voices in this fight for children. You're probably the leading voice, frankly, and thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, I'm a big fan of yours. You know that. Now, look, we first discovered this term Pizzagate. It stemmed from the Seth Rich release of the Podesta emails that were given to WikiLeaks. We know that's a fact. Kim.com has said he's willing to testify to Mueller about what he knows. The leaker was Seth Rich. They had him whacked. And that's how we all found out about the systemic problem of satanic ritual abuse, child trafficking, and child sacrifice. And people continue to say, oh, nothing has changed, nothing will ever change, nobody's been arrested. Let's just level set, shall we? You tweeted the other day, and it was spot on. 2 weeks after President Trump was sworn in, his DHS released this human trafficking PSA. It opens with a pizza shop, and the announcer says the signs for human trafficking are everywhere, to which I replied, and let's not forget Steve Scalise, who made this PSA about the plight of human trafficking in cities all over this country.
The sad truth is that human trafficking is a real problem plaguing each and every community here in the United States.
And then they attempted to assassinate him. And then we fast forward to March 13th of this year. President Donald J. Trump is working to end human trafficking. Quote, my administration will focus on ending the absolute horrific practice of human trafficking, and I'm prepared to bring the full force and weight of our government, whatever we can do in order to solve this horrific problem, end quote. And now we have this Allison Mack, Keith Raniere arrest. Things are happening, Liz.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Within the first 2 weeks of President Trump being sworn into office, he addressed child sex trafficking from the White House. He had a listening session. He invited reporters, he invited victims, and no one aired it. I mean, the White House press pool was invited into, I don't know if it was the boardroom or if it was the Oval Office, but I saw the video. Some of it was online. And he gave a listening session talking about, human trafficking. And no one covered it then. No one. And so I think that's part of the reason why people get frustrated, because he is doing a lot of stuff. Ivanka Trump has been doing a ton of stuff. Jeffrey Sessions has done a ton of stuff. They've held meetings. They've given speeches about human trafficking. They've addressed law enforcement, and Trump signed executive orders. They passed the human trafficking online law 2 weeks ago. But the media won't cover it. So people don't know that unless you follow me, you have no idea that all this stuff is happening. And actually, President Trump started taking on the pedophiles before he was even sworn in. So right after he was elected on November 8th in 2016, right after he was elected, he gave law enforcement the go-ahead to start arresting pedophiles. because they've been told to stand down for years. You know, these people, especially the elite pedophiles and the ones in Hollywood in particular, they have been protected for decades and decades and decades. And what we started seeing, and I tracked all of this, immediately after President Trump won, before he was even sworn in, boom, we started seeing all these pedophile arrests. And then within 2 weeks of him getting into office, he started addressing sex trafficking, human trafficking. No one talked about it. He actually even did an interview with Eric Bolling on Fox News Channel. And sometimes I have to wonder if this is why they went after Eric Bolling, where President Trump talks about human trafficking. He said, by the way, no one talks about it. He's like, no one talks about human trafficking. He's like, I talk about it. No one runs it. No one airs it. And Eric Bolling did actually run like him saying that. And like right after that, of course, Eric Bolling was targeted. Anyways, but he's done so much. And, you know, the Department of Homeland Security released numbers from a 6-month period in 2017. And their number was that they had, under President Trump's presidency, and during only a 6-month period, they arrested at least 6,000 pedophiles. So I think the number is much bigger. I think that at this point, there's probably been over 15,000 pedophiles that have been arrested under the Trump administration, which is like a record number of pedophiles, and it's way higher percentage of pedophiles and sex trafficking rings have been broken up under him than any other president, probably all presidents combined, that are still living.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a sea change, and I think it's, you and I have talked many times here, and I've said that it is the most important topic of our day, because if we can wake up everyone to the plight of this satanic ritual abuse and child trafficking, people on the left, even people who still worship Hillary for God knows whatever reason, even those people will be forced to wake up. And Q has said there's only 4 to 6% of the population that's beyond being able to be woken up. Some of those people are just hopeless diehards, and they're going to bitterly cling to the Hillary propaganda for the rest of their lives. But the rest of us are able to be awoken. And, you know, Q has said this thing is bigger than you can imagine. Maybe we should talk just a little bit about the NXIVM arrests of Keith Raniere and now Allison Mack.
Well,
and
just really,
go ahead. Sure.
I just want to like interject like how accurate you are to say that this is like the number one issue that we should all be addressing. And the reason why it's number one issue that we should all be addressing is because the child sex trafficking, the mind control that they do on these victims, it literally affects everyone every single day, and it bleeds into all of society's problems. Okay. So for example, like the refugee crisis, the border crisis, like illegal immigration, the motives behind all of that is human trafficking. Then if you look at like the false flags and the shooters and a lot of people in Hollywood that are like hysterically anti-Trump and they act crazy, a lot of them are mind controlled. A lot of these people, these false flag shooters, these celebrities in Hollywood, politicians, a lot of them are sex crime victims. They were trafficked as kids. They were born into these rings and they were mind controlled. The CIA developed the Project Monarch program, you know, right after World War II. And they have been, you know, mind controlling children at birth for decades now and creating like superhuman slaves and, you know, like sex slaves and like just all kinds of crazy, you know, slaves for the deep state. And these people are actively, without even knowing it, like working against like humanity in our country. And so it, you know, the human trafficking like ties into like everything that's going on in this world. And if we could eradicate the human trafficking and the sex crimes, like the SAR, then we wouldn't have half of the problems. We wouldn't have like any of the problems that we have in the world. You know, if you go to like an AA meeting, the majority of people that are alcoholics were sexually abused as kids. You know, so the biggest problem that we're facing in the world today is human trafficking.
Well, I completely agree. I want to back you up on something you said about MK Mind Control. And, you know, some people might check out when we go there because a lot of people don't understand. So this is very current news. The U.S. government just accidentally released electromagnetic mind control documents in a FOIA request. I'll just read you part of this. When researcher Curtis Waltman of website Muckrock received files resulting from his Freedom of Information Act request on Antifa and white supremacist groups from Washington State Fusion Center, he got a little bit more in the bargain for. He got a document and a diagram about psychoelectronic weapon effects on the human body. Folks, this stuff is real, and the enemies of humanity, the CIA, they do use this stuff. So when we hear about these shooters that go in and do these horrific things and they say they were hearing voices, you got to wonder what voices they were hearing. So, with that said, I want to say something else too before I forget. Guys, Liz is the number one voice in this space. If you want to support her, please go directly to Patreon right now. Let's get 1,000 new patrons for Liz over at her Patreon account. Pledge $1 a month, $5 a month, and help keep her in this fight, in this space. There's so precious few of us, and aligned against us are people like Jake Tapper, whose wife Jennifer Tapper told the Washingtonian, before any of us had ever heard of Pizzagate, that her favorite family restaurant was Comet Ping Pong, and their favorite date night restaurant was Buck's Fishing and Camping. Both of which are Elephantis businesses, both of which are involved in the Pizzagate allegations, and neither of which any of us had ever heard of prior to hearing about Pizzagate. You just can't make that up, Liz. Just a coincidence, right?
Many of them, and did you see Greta Van Susteren? Greta has tweeted how the pizza there is so great. It's a great place, and she gets takeout there twice a week. The owner promotes pedophilia on his public Instagram page. They have like demonic and satanic symbolism all over their restaurant. They literally depict children and call them hotards and like depict children in sexual ways, like on like James Alefantis' like Instagram page. And, you have someone like Greta saying that that this is a great place and she gets takeout there from there like twice a week. I mean, it's crazy.
You know what I think we're starting to wake up to? Is that the people in the highest echelons of power, and Q has made reference to this too, the people in the highest echelons of power, be they models, be they actors, be they talking heads at news networks like CNN, have these familial backgrounds that need to be looked into. And I want to give everyone an excellent example. Recall this, folks, from 2014. DuPont Air gets no prison time for raping his own 3-year-old daughter. Yeah. Robert Richards IV was in 2009 convicted of raping his 3-year-old daughter 7 years after she, then 5, told relatives that she didn't want my daddy touching me anymore. It then came out that he also abused his own son. He didn't go to prison because the judge, probably a Freemason, said he wouldn't be able to handle prison very well, so he got probation for being a pedophile of his own children. Liz, I'm starting to believe that this systemic pedophilia issue is familial. They do it to their own kids, and I think they've done it for centuries, and that's how they keep all of this stuff covered up.
That's statistically true. Yes, most children that are abused by their parents have parents who are abused by their parents. So it's cyclical, and unfortunately, most children who are abused they're more likely to grow up to be abusers than not. So that, again, to reiterate, this is like the number one problem in the world. That is why it's so important that we eradicate it, because the cycle will never end, and it'll just continue to get worse if it's not addressed.
Yeah.
But it is systematic, and it's no mistake that people that come from these kinds of backgrounds are put in positions of power on purpose. And I mean, I can just vouch from my own experience as a journalist. Like I'm as Kanye West would say, I'm a free thinker, and I always have been. And I have very strong political beliefs, but I was a journalist in the mainstream media for 2 decades, and I had no problem taking down people that I liked, whose politics I agreed with, including people I voted for, if it led me to the truth. And that should be the mindset of every journalist. What I learned is that I had a very successful career as a journalist, and I had, the number one gossip column in Chicago for the Red Eye edition of the Chicago Tribune for 7 years. I was constantly breaking stories. I've worked at so many entertainment magazines. Like, I don't know anyone else that had as many front page stories as I did. And I flew around the world covering high profile celebrities and politicians, but I could never get past a certain point. And I would see other people who weren't good constantly getting promoted, getting raises. And I'm like, I broke 15 cover stories, in 6 months, and they broke none, and they got promoted. It never made sense to me, but now it does, because, they strategically promote people, within their own families, and people that are willing to be puppets and pawns that will push an agenda. They don't care about the truth. They don't care if you're a good journalist. They don't care if you've broken I mean, Sean, when I was still in the mainstream media writing for Town Hall and the Observer, my stories were on Drudge. They were going viral. They would get up to 1 million hits.
Yeah.
And they would make companies a lot of money. And
Yeah.
and how did I get treated for breaking viral stories? I'd get fired.
Yeah, but that's because you're not compromised, Liz. The people that are paid the most money are probably the most compromised. I mean, look no further than Anderson Cooper, his CIA ties for 6 months in college, and now Q is dropping all these breadcrumbs about maybe what's really going on with Anderson Cooper and his familial ties. So, I mean, folks, Q has said you can't imagine the size of this. So let's jump back into the current news of the Allison Mack, Keith Raniere arrests with Nixium. Q has said this is a big, big, big deal because Allison Mack is singing like a canary. And we're finding out very, very interesting things, including a morsel suggesting Barry Soetoro himself, Barack Obama, hasn't been involved in the diddling of kids. Now, I guess that wouldn't be a shocker to anybody who pays attention to this stuff, but it is new news.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, well, again, Barack Obama, we learned from WikiLeaks that they ordered $650,000 worth of hot dogs for a party in the White House under Barack Obama's administration. And we know that outside food is not allowed. And we also know that hot dog is a pedophile code word, I believe, for little boys. So, and we also know that Barack Obama and Joe Biden exchanged little children's friendship bracelets with a slice of pizza on these bracelets. And this happened, I believe, before Pizzagate came out and before we knew that pizza was a pedophile code word. So, I mean, he's been actually throwing this in our faces. And Q, alluded to the fact that there's one girl in particular, Maggie Nixon, that he has been molesting since she was a child. And by the way, I've done research on this girl, and wow, she definitely strikes me as someone that was born into a ring. I have a friend that's a researcher, and it looks like she comes from a family that traffics kids for a living. And my friend actually she's a private investigator, and she did a bunch of background checks on some of these family members and whatnot. And all these kids they have don't have birth certificates.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, just like Barack.
Yeah, right. They have that in common. And Maggie Nixon, it looks like I believe she was living in San Diego. And I've done reporting down in San Diego. I don't know if you remember, but when Ashton Kutcher, right before he got a divorce from Demi Moore, he was busted cheating on her in San Diego at the Hard Rock Hotel. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I had to go down there and do reporting on this for 10 days and hang out with these girls are all hanging out with Ashton Kutcher. And they were all very young girls. I believe some of them were underage, and they all were kept by these elite men. I mean, they were all part of a big prostitution ring, and some of these girls were not legal. So it doesn't surprise me this girl ended up in San Diego. There's a huge prostitution ring there. And Sean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I would go in these girls' apartments, and these girls weren't even 21 years old, and their apartments were multi-million-dollar apartments in downtown San Diego, the view of the harbor, and they all had older guys, that kept them. I mean, it was like a sophisticated ring.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about the Maggie Nixon reference from Q is we see these pictures of Barack and Maggie, and the question Q asks is, why so many pictures with the same girl over so many years? Then we find out that her grandmother was an actress on, I believe it's As the World Turns, and then we see a picture of her mother with James Alefantis, so certainly that opens up a whole nother rabbit hole. Q continues to post As the World Turns. All of this stuff is coming out. The Stroke Page treason, the Comey treason, the sedition, the perjury Comey is guilty of, Clinton perjury, Clinton treason, child sex trafficking. It's all coming out. I feel like we're hitting a
boiling point.
Yeah, a boiling point.
Absolutely. Yeah, and someone said, he keeps saying As the World Turns, and he made references to red carpets, and someone just reminded me that the daytime Emmy announcements, I think, are this Sunday, and so someone's predicting that maybe they'll be, maybe he'll drop the next MOAB during the daytime Emmys when everyone's watching TV. That would explain the As the World Turns references. I don't know. But yeah, everything's coming to a boiling point, and The arrest of Keith Raniere and Allison Mack is a huge turning point, and this is going to unravel like a lot of the child sex trafficking with the pedophile elites. What's frustrating is that they have been arrested for trafficking children, and no one's mentioned that except for the Daily Mail last night. The Daily Mail admitted that the U.S. attorney in New York has accused Raniere of raping girls as young as 12 and 15. Actually, they didn't say raping. They said, having sex with, which is frustrating, and victims do not like to read that because a 12-year-old cannot consent to sex. But, when Keith Raniere and the NXIVM sex cult was first exposed and he was arrested, CNN didn't cover it. MSNBC didn't cover it. This is can you imagine if someone close with Trump was, leading a sex cult that was trafficking children? Like, can you imagine how the mainstream media would react? Like, for days, CNN, MSNBC, not even on their website, not even a blurb, they would not cover this. And it wasn't until Allison Mack got arrested that they were kind of forced to then, because the story got much bigger, that they were kind of forced to start covering it. But what they're all leaving out is that they are finally starting to say that she was arrested for sex trafficking. Initially, they said that she was in a sex cult. And now they're finally admitting that it was sex trafficking. But what they're all leaving out is that she has charges that are pending for trafficking children.
Right.
And it specifically says trafficking children. And no one in the mainstream media is reporting that, and it's like, you have to ask yourself, why are they all covering this up? And the answer is because the mainstream media is involved. And there are people that are tied to this cult that are very elite members of society who are linked to people in the mainstream media. And that's why this arrest is so significant, because Allison Mack is talking, she's giving up evidence, and she's naming names. And this and the rest of her and Keith Raniere and the takedown of the sex cult that was trafficking children could unravel the global pedophile networks with the elites. It will.
Yeah, and when we talk about families, powerful families, we should also mention the name Bronfman, which I believe are the heirs to the Seagram's fortune. Yeah. And we've got one of the heiresses to the Bronfman fortune. Is it Sarah or Claire? I forget, but one of them or both of them were involved in NXIVM. And right. I think at the end of the day, what's going to wake people up is the fact that the rat hole runs so deep. And so the significance of these arrests is that Allison Mack, as recently as 3 months ago, I don't think had any idea she was really under investigation. Her life was operating as normal, and suddenly, overnight, her life changed, and she's now facing 15 years to life, Liz. I mean, if she has the goods on these people, if the authorities can keep her safe and prevent her from getting whacked, and she's spilling the beans, this is potentially one of their worst nightmares.
Oh, she is. And, I don't know if you saw the sketch of her in court. She was hysterical. Yeah. So, she knows that she's screwed, and she did give up the goods. I guarantee you that. And, even if they did knock her off, hopefully they won't. But I think that she's given up enough evidence and information that killing her won't even matter at this point, because I feel that they have so much on these people. And you mentioned the Dalai Lama, and this cult also held meetings at Richard Branson's island. And they also had members that are members of the Clinton Global Initiative. So these people are tied to billionaires, the Clintons, politicians, the Dalai Lama. This satanic sex cult trafficking children is tied to elites around the world. So this is a really big deal, and this is gonna the layers of the onion are gonna start coming out now. Thank God, and I think that this arrest is gonna expose many, many people.
Yeah, and Q says, trust the plan, have faith, trust POTUS. And I think what's really interesting about this particular arrest of Allison and Keith Raniere is the fact that it does at first feel like a little bit of a limited hangout, right? It sort of feels like, oh, you're kidding me. They're probably involved in a sex cult that involves grown women. That was my first impression. Exactly. And then we see the indictment say, no, actually there's child trafficking involved here. The layers of the onion being peeled. See, this is such a great approach because If through discovery, if through the prosecution of these two, if through her spilling the beans comes the names of the much bigger fish. See, they can't go after James Alefantis and Podesta and Clinton right off the bat because the enemies of the president would say, oh, he's targeting them. This is all a lie. He needs to be impeached. If we go through procedure and discovery in court through a smaller case that ensnares so many bigger fish, oh my God, this is huge. It's huge.
It's actually brilliant, and it's like I mean I get frustrated. I put myself out there, and I've like accused John Podesta as being a pedophile and a child trafficker. There's no one that wants to see these names being arrested like John Podesta and Hillary Clinton more than me. However, they have to do it in a way where it doesn't invoke like mass hysteria. There are still people that believe that Hillary Clinton's a good person. There's still people that have no idea that she's involved in Satanism and she's eating babies and trafficking kids. They've literally no idea. And I've said this like over and over again. They can't come out and President Trump just can't come out and arrest Hillary. He can't come out and say like, oh yeah, all these people are eating kids and raping kids and performing satanic rituals on them. You can't just drop that bomb on people. People would lose their mind. I mean, look at how they lost their mind just by her simply losing the election. There was like riots everywhere. People were hysterical just because she lost. Imagine when they find out that she's a horrible person and basically everything that they've been taught and told their whole life is a lie. Everything. People are going to lose their mind. So they have to do this in doses, and there's been a very coordinated effort with the Q team and President Trump and the White Hats to slowly wake up the public to this reality. And the beginning of this was with Harvey Weinstein. You know, they exposed Harvey Weinstein, and that exposed so many sexual predators in Hollywood. Now they're moving into the pedophiles. And the pedophiles is now bleeding into exposing the pedophile Satanists. There's different layers to these like sexual predators, and the worst ones are the pedophile Satanists. The people are involved in not just raping these kids, but they're involved in committing satanic ritualistic abuse on them. So the way that they're doing this is actually brilliant, and they're doing it in a very slow way, so people can, take very small pills, take small doses of the red pill, so it doesn't cause mass hysteria in this country, so they don't have to invoke, declare martial law. And so that's why it's happening the way it's happening. And, and again, you're right. Like, they can't just arrest a big name like Hillary Clinton. Like, Keith Raniere, I'd never heard of him until he was arrested. And, Allison Mack I had heard of, but she's not a huge name. But they can't go after, like, the really big A-listers quite yet. So the tactic they're using is brilliant, and it's the way to do it as peacefully as possible.
I agree 100%. And I just want to give context. Again, I'm all about the big picture, because when people watch one-off interviews like this, they don't always understand the big picture. So let's look at the big picture. This is very important. So when we talk about the systemic problem of child sex trafficking and satanic ritual abuse and Pizzagate and all that stuff, there are enemies of ours, enemies of truth out there, Liz, that will take an interview like this. They'll take something you said out of context, and it'll show up on Right Wing Watch YouTube channel or something. And it makes us look as though we're tinfoil hat nuts when we talk about this, but we're not. Let's, again, big picture. Who is John Podesta? John Podesta served as White House Chief of Staff to President Bill Clinton from 98 to 2001, and as counselor to Barack Obama from 2014 to 2015, and then he headed up Hillary's campaign. So this is a rat's nest that goes back through multiple presidents. And folks, it was Andrew Breitbart who tweeted on February 4th, 2011, how Prague guru John Podesta isn't a household name as a world-class underage sex slave op cover-upper, folks, that means pedophilia, defending unspeakable dregs, escapes me. And Breitbart paid for, I think, so much of its truth-telling less than a year later with his life. These people are being exposed. And you're right, we have to do it systematically. We have to do it step by step by step to wake up the public.
Yeah, and, I will also mention, because a lot of people don't know this, there were a ton of pedophiles that were arrested last year. I actually put a list together, and I put it on my website, lizcrokin.com. But there were like many elite pedophiles who were arrested. I mean, we had multiple people that were involved in Jerry Sandusky's elite pedophile ring from Penn State. I think there was 3 officials from Penn State that were arrested last year. His son was arrested. Was Jared Fogle arrested last year, or someone?
Was that the Subway guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a couple years ago. But I mean, isn't it funny how, like, I'm sure nobody knew about that the spokesperson for Subway was diddling kids? I'm sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean, again, it's systemic, and it goes to the highest levels of even corporations.
Oh yeah, and then to tie Jared Fogle though into Pizzagate, one of the bands that performed at Comet Ping Pong made references to Jared Fogle being a pedophile and saying how he loves pizza and that he was like he frequented Comet Ping Pong. So they're all connected. A lot of them are in the same rings, and they're never isolated. And people need to understand that. Like, for example, Jerry Sandusky, he did not. The media portrays these people as like lone wolves, as isolated incidents, when in reality, Jerry Sandusky ran a charity that was a front for child sex trafficking, and his elite friends would donate to the charity, and in exchange, he would like whore out a child to them. And there are a lot of people involved in these rings, including members of the local police, FBI, like you name it. And that's how they've managed to flourish for so long and remain protected, because people in law enforcement are in on it.
Yeah, Sandusky reminds me, he's really the American version of Jimmy Savile, although he wasn't as well connected. He didn't get knighted by the Queen. He wasn't best buddies with Prince Charles. But you're right. And that whole Sandusky thing was ultimately covered up. Again, they really just hung it on this one guy, even though he was networking children for powerful people.
Right. That's what they've always done. They've always, like Dennis Hastert. Dennis Hastert, good friends with the Podestas. They did these questionable trips to Japan, like, decades ago, where I'm convinced that they were trafficking kids and abusing kids. They went to some camp in Japan. There's a lot going on with Dennis Hastert, but again, they pegged him as like a lone wolf, and he was thrown under the bus. And they even like made references about Dennis Hastert and joked about him in some of the WikiLeaks emails. And there's no question that he was in a ring with John Podesta and Tony Podesta. So the rabbit hole is very deep, but finally it's all coming to light now, and people are hopefully starting to realize that these people are never lone wolves, and they're operating in rings, and they're all protecting themselves. And all kind of like the rats are all starting to scurry now. This Nexium cult had at least one meeting at Richard Branson's island, and this has been reported, by the way, for years. Like, I dug up articles from years ago talking about how these members were at Richard Branson's island, and at the time when these reports were published, he never denied it. And now all of a sudden that they've been busted for trafficking kids, he's like denying it left and right. So they're all like panicking, and the rats are all starting to scurry. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, well, they should scurry, and they should be in a panic because they no longer have the cover of what before was pure 100% unadulterated cover of a corrupt Department of Justice, a corrupt State Department, the secret seventh floor shadow government operated by Hillary and her cohorts. It was the shadow government, and these people all had cover. Now, thank God, I mean, seriously, praise God in heaven, they don't have cover, and they should be afraid for what's coming. All right, so before we wrap up, just a couple more questions. Do you have any updates at all? Have you heard anything about Tony Podesta? I mean, that guy should be indicted for his crimes along with his creepy brother John, but I don't think we've heard anything from Tony Podesta since he had to close and shutter up the doors at his crappy company.
No, someone reported that his art, I think I saw someone reported that his art has been confiscated or seized. He has all that pedophile art, the satanic art. It's just disgusting. The statue that depicts one of Jeffrey Dahmer's beheaded victims. I mean, the guy's a total psychopath. I think that he has been arrested already, and they haven't released that information because he's just totally MIA. No one's spotted him or seen him in months. And President Trump made a point of asking where he is. So that's his way of trying to encourage us to like look into it, or people in the mainstream media. And of course they didn't. But I think that he's probably been arrested. At least he's been interrogated. I can guarantee you that. But, they shut down his lobbying firm real quick, and he got out of Dodge real quick. So he's in deep trouble, and I think he knows it. And I think that he's been arrested. I believe he's been arrested.
All right.
And that's what, maybe he's hiding. Who knows?
Yeah, well, he ought to hide in shame, I mean, at the very least. I mean, if he's laying low, that's probably smart. A lot of these people have such hubris. Like Hillary Clinton, despite her litany of crimes now being so public, I mean, crimes that run the gamut over decades, everybody aligned against her. So half the country, more than half the country, knows the truth. And she'll continue to get out there with her hubris and actually speak in front of people and try to talk about, how she would have made a great president. I mean, it's sure lunacy. She's an absolute psychopath. I mean, that's the problem, Liz. Most of these people are absolute psychopaths.
Yeah, and that's going to be their downfall too, because they're just giving themselves more rope to hang themselves on. So that's going to work against them in the end. And it always does. Yeah. With a sociopath, sociopaths believe that they know better than you, and they're smarter than you, and they're smarter than authorities, and they're smarter than their victims. And it's always their downfall. So let her keep talking. Yeah. Let her keep making her rope longer. That's only going to work, for people like us and against her. Yeah. Well, and it's true. It's quite entertaining watching her tripping and falling all over the world and walking with boots and casts, and it's pretty entertaining. But yeah, she needs to be thrown in jail very soon.
And if the worst horrors are to be believed about what she's been involved with, the NYPD leakers about that video found on Anthony Weiner's laptop, she may have Kuru. I mean, if she's involved in some of the most disgusting things we can imagine, some of these people might literally be dying because of the things they've done to children.
Oh, literally, I agree. I believe that she does. And I was watching a video of Nancy Pelosi yesterday, and her hand was just shaking. Does she have Parkinson's?
I don't know. I can't believe she's still being elected time and time again.
She could. Nancy Pelosi, we know that she owns Goat Hill Pizza Shop. She owns a pizza shop with a satanic logo on it. You can't make this stuff up. I believe she's up to her eyeballs in the child sex trafficking. It wouldn't surprise me at all if she has Kuru too, and one of the symptoms would be, neurological issues. So that would explain why her hand shakes while she talks.
She owns a pizza joint called Goat Hill, Baphomet Hill? No, as in Baphomet, goat's head. Oh, these people are so evil. Look, again, I love all the naysayers who say nothing has changed, nothing will ever change, new boss is the same as the old boss, nobody's being arrested. These armchair quarterbacks really disgust me because there are people in the fight like you and like Craig Sawyer and like so many other people in the administration, like Steve Scalise, who took a bullet for talking about the plague of human trafficking. And we have these armchair quarterbacks saying nothing is happening. It's just disgusting because, folks, things are happening. And you retweeted on Tuesday night something from the U.S. Department of Defense. Did you say there's pizza down there? Wait for me. And they show a couple of their special forces team doing a free fall. And I retweeted it saying, let's take out the Pizzagate bad guys and rendition them to Gitmo for their just reward. To which somebody else said, isn't pizza sometimes really just pizza? To which I said, yes, sometimes pizza is pizza. Unfortunately, as it pertains to the elites in power, pizza often refers to child sex. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's usually the case. So maybe in this case, it is the white knights saying, we're coming for you. There's no place to hide.
These elites use their pedophile code and their symbolism constantly. And what I love about President Trump and the White Hats is they take their symbolism, they throw it back in their face. That was not a mistake, okay? They tweeted that on purpose to let them know that they're coming for them, and they are.
Yeah, and what has Q said? Symbolism will be their downfall.
Exactly.
Right? I just love it. All right, well, let's just wrap up with this from Q, post number 1267. They tried to delete the proof. POTUS win 120. Deep clean. They never thought she would lose. Insurance without cover. Nothing is deleted. Look, guys, I think if you want to see the cup as empty versus half full, go for it. I personally can't get through life day to day viewing our situation as hopeless. My feelings would be a lot different if the Wicked Witch was in the White House. But since President Trump is in the White House, there does appear to be a sea change here. And at least if you're an elite pedophile, you ought to be in a panic because we are coming for you.
Yeah.
All right. Liz, go ahead.
Can I just real quickly talk about Kanye?
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot Kanye because you retweeted him. He made a reference to the movie Get Out, and he says, I'm no longer in the sunken place. Mm-hmm. I love that. And he's taken heat, of course, for saying he likes President Trump.
Yeah. So I just want to say, I've known Kanye West for many years. I'm from Chicago. Kanye West is from Chicago. I ran the entertainment column, in the Red Eye edition of the Chicago Tribune for 7 years, and he lived there, and I lived there, so I was constantly covering him or at events with him. And I'm friends with some people that are very good friends with him. And so I've known him for a very long time. I've been backstage at his concerts. I've been in his dressing room with him at one of his shows. So I know this guy, and I've had nothing but positive experiences with him. He's, he's always been such a nice person whenever I've seen him or talked to him, and very gracious and just and he comes off very humble and down to earth and just chill, like not at all the way that he comes off sometimes when he's on stage. Anyways, so it's important that people know the background of what happened with the whole Kanye West incident. Kanye West got on stage at a concert and said that he's like, I'm on my Trump, SHIT right now. And he said, he kind of went on a rant and he said, Jay-Z has murderers. And he started calling out some deep state actors and exposing some truths. And I think the main thing that he said that pissed them off was exposing Jay-Z. Jay-Z is a bad guy who has committed crimes, who's committed violent crimes in the past.
Been pictured with Marina Abramovic, the spirit cooker.
Yes, and he's deeply tied in with the spirit cooker, the satanic witch, Marina Abramovic. He's a horrible, evil person. I did a story in 2012. I was about to do a story. I was about to interview a girl that was one of his mistresses. And after I talked to her, she went to Jay-Z and basically said to him, I'm going to do this story unless you pay me. Within like 36 hours, she died at the age of 28 under very, very shady circumstances. And that was in 2012. And that's when I realized, wow, like the Illuminati is real. Like this stuff really does happen. Like there was no doubt in my mind that she was a hit job. And by the way, she was about to come forward and expose Jay-Z like the week before Beyonce announced her pregnancy of the pregnancy of their first child, Blue, on stage at the MTV VMAs. And that was supposed to be a huge, huge publicity stunt for Beyonce, which it was. And this interview with this girl that had an affair with Jay-Z could have derailed all that positive publicity that they had been planning to gain from this publicity stunt announcing her pregnancy at the VMAs. So they needed to eliminate that problem. And sure enough, this poor girl dies this untimely death under very mysterious circumstances. Anyways, fast forward to, Kanye West going on this rant, talking positively about President Trump and exposing Jay-Z. I think within like 36 hours of him exposing Jay-Z, he's thrown in a psych ward. All right. One of my very good friends was with one of his family members that was with him when he went crazy. And she insists that he was drugged, that they targeted him, that he was targeted, that he was drugged, that he has never acted like this before. Like someone that was with him when this happened was a family member of his that's known him his whole life, that knows him very well. And they're like, he was not acting the way he normally acts. They believe that he was drugged. I believe that he was targeted for exposing Jay-Z, and they threw him in a psych ward, and he was thrown there against his will, and that's like common knowledge. And that was their way to say, shut up. And if you don't shut up, we'll kill you, or we'll hurt your family, or whatever. And you also have to remember that Kim Kardashian was targeted as well. There were people that broke into her hotel room, I believe it was in Paris, and she was tied up and roughed up. And
her jewelry was stolen.
Yeah, but the Kardashians are very open about literally everything, all of their trash. And on their show, they talk about everything. I mean, they talked about Caitlyn's sex change, like their makeups or breakups or divorces. Like they talk about literally everything. And what I found stunning about that whole incident that happened to Kim, they didn't really talk about it at all on the show. And I've covered the Kardashians for years. I've known them for years as well. And that was stunning to me. That spoke volumes to me. That made me think there is something way more to this story that's very dark and very sinister going on with this incident. And I believe it could be tied to Kanye. I believe that they are threatening Kanye West and possibly Kim into silence. And so what was the first thing that Kanye West did when he got out of the psych ward? He went to see President Trump. He knows that President Trump is not one of them. And I believe that he went to meet with President Trump because he was scared. And he wanted to tell President Trump the truth of what happened to him and how he was targeted, and he wanted protection from the president. Right. I believe that's the real reason why he went to meet with President Trump. Why else would he go fly to meet with President Trump right after he was thrown in the psych ward? So now he's back on Twitter, and he's exposing all these truths, and he's promoting a black conservative, Candace Owens. I believe that he has been targeted by the deep state, and who knows what they've done to him. And I believe that, you know, he's finally like breaking free of them, and he feels empowered to expose them now because he knows President Trump is taking them down, and they don't have the power that they used to have over him and so many people that have been enslaved by these people. So that's my take on the whole Kanye West situation.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think you're probably right over the target here because, you know, for me personally, I've always seen the Kardashians and that entire show as the premier example of really the dumbing down of America. It's exactly what the Illuminati and the New World Order would want. It would want people to focus their attention on fame. Now, with that said, we know that the CIA and the powers that be don't want strong African-American voices who have broken their conditioning. Look no further than Martin Luther King. And I think as it relates to Kanye, again, I'll go back to that tweet that he sent out. He's no longer in the sunken place. If you haven't seen the movie Get Out, I suggest you do, because the sunken place refers directly to deep mind hypnotism, or you could say MK Ultra mind control. He's no longer there. He's broken his conditioning, and we need to actually pray for those who have broken their conditioning and are now speaking out because their lives truly are at risk.
And I, you know, when I first started talking about Kanye, I remember I said that in person he was like the nicest guy. He was so chill, and he's not at all kind of like sometimes what you see on stage. When that whole incident happened where he like got on stage and interrupted Taylor Swift when she was accepting an award, I think it was at the VMAs, I believe he was under mind control. That's something that they would make someone like him do to divide people. The deep state's MO is to divide, and conquer, right? But do that to a white girl. That invoked, you know, people like that invoked a discussion about race and, you know, women and like it created chaos, right? And that's something that's the stuff that the deep state thrives on.
That's right. And what I was going to say is, you know, when you say mind control, we can also just parse it down to something a little more basic, like all-consuming hubris and the worship, the idolatry of being a star. That might explain part of where he was, but I do believe his conditioning has been broken. And as it relates to the music industry, I just want to share this with people. Anybody who thinks that what we're talking about, if anybody thinks we're not over the mark here when we talk about the insidious, disgusting, satanic nature of the music industry, I want you to Google this right now, folks. Google CAA headquarters in Los Angeles and look at the Illuminati symbolism, the satanic symbolism of the architecture of the CAA headquarters. And I also want to share this. We were all abused, says former Pussycat doll Kaya Jones, says the band was a front for a prostitution ring and the singers were abused by music executives. This is real. It's really disgusting, and it's all coming out. And Liz, again, you're one of the truth tellers, so I want to thank you so much for being there for us.
Yeah, most of these young stars are raped. I mean, Kesha and both Lady Gaga have admitted that they've been raped by people within the music industry. Most of these music executives and producers are raping the artists, and part of the reasons why they rape them is to control them, is to mind control them. They use the sexual assault as leverage, you know. And we know Interscope Records has a pedophile symbol in its logo. And the people that in the music business that speak out against the child sex trafficking and the trafficking that goes on in the music industry and the SRA, such as Prodigy from Mobb Deep, or there was just a DJ Avicii who was exposing elite pedophile rings in his documentaries.
That's right.
Was just killed under shady circumstances the other day.
Like 28 years old, right?
Yeah, and then we have Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell, who are also exposing sex trafficking. Isn't it crazy how many musicians exposing child sex trafficking and elite pedophile rings? meet these untimely deaths.
Yeah, just one big coincidence, Liz. I mean, that's exactly, it ties back to the Jennifer Tapper statement about Pizzagate. And guys, for those who don't understand what Pizzagate is, I'll just give you one little morsel you can Google on your own. Google the logo for Besta Pizza, which is right in that same area. And their logo, prior to people knowing about Pizzagate, was a known by the FBI logo for pedophilia.
Yes.
Okay, for child lovers. And then after Pizzagate broke, they changed their logo. You can't make this stuff up, folks.
People that aren't guilty don't do that. And people that aren't guilty don't make their Instagram pages private.
That's right. And I hear that James Alefantis is still up to his hubris-filled dirty tricks with his now what he thought was a private Instagram page, or he opened a new page. Titus Frost did some reporting about that and shared some of their sick things that these people continue to post because they haven't been brought to justice. And, pray God that they are brought to justice, and soon, Liz.
Yeah, they will be. And we'll all celebrate 11/11/18.
Yeah, all right.
So much for having me back on.
Oh, thank you so much. And I do want to give you some more Patreon followers. Can you just shout that out for us? How do people find you? Give us all your good info.
Yeah, it's better to, I'm not really active on Patreon. It's better just to donate on PayPal.
Oh, okay. Well, give us your what's your PayPal address?
I think it's paypal.me/Liz Crokin.
Okay. But you do have a Patreon page, right?
I know, I do.
Okay, well then the beautiful part about Patreon is that people who are already on there supporting other truth tellers, they'll just pop over to your page and they'll donate, $5 a month to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to activate I have followers and I haven't activated linked my bank account to it yet. I need to figure that out.
Okay.
I'm so bad at that.
Get on it. Well, the problem is you're too busy telling the truth all day long. You got to take a little time for yourself to set those pages up.
It's exhausting, and then you covering this is so dark and exhausting, and then it's you just don't want to do anything else,
I know.
Ugh.
All righty. Well, thanks for all you do. Hey, there's Teddy Bear. That's your dog, right? Isn't that his name, Teddy Bear?
Teddy Bear Snuggles.
Yeah, he's a cutie. That's the dog that the Clintons and their associates, I believe, tried to poison.
Yeah, they did. And I knew they were going. I knew they were going to do something to me or him. I had a feeling. That day, I was supposed to go to an event in Hollywood, and I canceled. And I never cancel. And I just knew something was going to happen. I didn't want to leave him. And sure enough, he went into anaphylactic shock. He was poisoned. Went into anaphylactic shock. His heart almost stopped, and he almost died. And if I had gone to that event, then he would have died.
Yeah, if you'd have gone to the event, he would have passed away. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a sweetie. What kind of dog is he?
Havanese. He's a communist. He's from Cuba.
He's a communist. He's a good communist, then.
Yeah.
All right.
He likes that.
All right. And you're a good reporter. We love you, Liz. Thanks so much.
I love you, too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. You know that. We'll do this again soon. Guys, for Real News 24/7, follow us at SGT Report and check out Liz Crokin on Twitter. You won't be able to stop following her. She's prolific. Thanks, Liz.
You take care.
All right. God bless.
The evil of this, the satanic nature of the pedophilia that's going on and the combination of the Satanism with the pedophilia is going to be shocking to the average American.